This presentation was given to the Central Iowa Beekeepers. It's a presentation showing how I used Google Business to promote a law practice and how it can be adapted for selling local Iowa honey. Adapting Google Business for the sale of any product is multifactorial. You need to brand your product, you need to understand the economics of whatever you're selling. It's always good to look at adding value, finding other ways you can make money off your products. Educating the consumer is very important. And of course, having a web page that can be referred to from Google Business is good. Finding referral sources such as free internet ads adds to the profitability of using Google Business. The problem for local honey producers is that honey is a commodity. It's kind of like corn or soybeans or wheat. There's a lot of it out there. Any way that a producer can create something that's unique in their product is important, and that's part of the branding concept. But if you try to compete with these big companies like Costco or Sam's Club, you're going to lose every time. So you need to have something different about your product or be able to advertise it in a way that makes it unique. The same thing goes for legal services. The specialty is everything. If you don't have something the public wants, you can't sell it. The government doesn't control the sale of honey. There's no rationing or price controls. This is called neoliberalism, where it's a free market or open market concept. I'm not going to get into Milton Friedman and his economic theories, even though he was 100% right. If you want to learn about that, the Chicago Boys of Chile established that neoliberalism is the best economic model for a country's growth. Chile today is still has the highest per capita income of any other South American country, and it's primarily the result of Milton Friedman's economic theory of neoliberalism. There's a great documentary video on that that you can find in one of the free channels if you want to watch a video. And there's a lot of writings about the Chicago Boys of Chile. Very interesting stuff, but we're not going to get into that here. Some say that lawyers are as common as white lab mice, but not as easy to get attached to. The same might be said for beekeepers. Um, on the right, you see I did a Google search for an unemployment lawyer in Des Moines. I come up top on that list, and primarily because of the 170 reviews that I have. That's what gives you a good ranking under Google Business. And you can see that there's a lot of good lawyers underneath that. But I was able to achieve that ranking without spending any money. Now, you don't need to be number one on the list, but you certainly want to have your listing on the first page. I want to talk about product branding. And if you take note that of my cowboy hat that I'm wearing, uh, that was my branding. It allowed people to remember who I am and find my ads back or find my web page back. It was one very effective means of branding. Coming up with a good brand to identify your product is important. Some companies have used the image of a person to promote the idea of happiness, healthy, wholesome food. And, that concept worked for decades, for several generations until something else changed. But it's amazing how they could take ground up cereal grain flour, which is a commodity and available in the millions of tons, and get a premium price out of it because they used an individual to promote their product. So your branding should promote memory and identify positive attributes or associate with something that is positive, that's happy, that's wholesome, that's healthy. If you want to research some ideas for labeling and branding, go to a wine store. Some of these wine companies are so creative. I chose this label because when you walk in to the store, you can pick this out among 100 bottles so quickly. and kind of an odd name for what is actually a very good quality wine for its price range. And the more you look at the label, the more information you see. It's just really interesting. I tell people the more I drink it, the more I see on the label too. But have a label that imparts knowledge, but is also very attractive and draws the eye. Raymond Gardens is a butterfly garden in Ames, Iowa, and it has very positive image within the community. There's folks that put their honey, put hives up at Raymond Gardens and then sell their honey as Raymond Gardens honey. I couldn't find the ad on Facebook, but they sell out very quick by associating with that particular icon of Iowa. Now they have a competitive price. The 12 pounders are at $55 per container. And from what I've seen in my studying the Midwest prices, if you do gallons at $55, you'll sell out faster than anybody else. And gallons are very popular. I really like this label because it has everything that I think it should have. Just Iowa Honey, Just is the last name of the honey producers. They are absolutely outstanding beekeepers. But it has your name, you have your location, it has multiple means of contact, and it says pure Iowa honey. It's just a really great use of the name, and it promotes memory retention. I put this label in because it's very beautiful, but doesn't really give you what you want. These folks are outstanding producers down in Missouri, but here you have a label that tells you the weight, but doesn't give you any contact information. Tells you where it came from, which I think is very, very important in labeling. You need to say where your honey comes from, as people like local honey. But by all means, there should be some contact information on every label. This is a 5-gallon bucket by a beekeeper, Jamie Beyer, who is currently president of the Central Iowa Beekeepers Incorporated. And for on a 5-gallon bucket, you have a lot of room. There's a lot of things you can put there. He chose to put his web address, and then on the top, there's other contact information. But I think that the example here is you could do a lot with a 5-gallon bucket. And 5-gallon bucket goes to people that use a lot of honey. So there's other ways to promote the use of honey on all that extra space. So here's the story about Jamie. He mentioned to me at one of our meetings that he had thousands of pounds of honey left over from the last year and was moving into another harvest season. And I suggested that he put an ad up on Facebook Marketplace and see how 5-gallon buckets do. And also put one on Craigslist. And well, he didn't know how to do it. I said, go find a fourth grader. Well, he didn't know any fourth graders. So I said, send me some photos. Well, he sent me this photo. And I put the ad up. At that time, within 60 miles of Des Moines, there weren't anybody else selling 5-gallon buckets. So he had a corner on the market. But as Milton Friedman's neoliberalism goes, you know that there's going to be a reaction from the market. And it didn't take hardly any time at all. And somebody was up there with a bucket that was $5 or $6 cheaper. And that's fine. I mean, selling 5-gallon buckets is all about locality. So one thing I want to point out about this is the keywords I use to make his product unique, even though it is a 5-gallon bucket, is the words wholesale and Boone, Iowa. So he's selling his product in a location close to Boone because 5-gallon buckets are heavy. You have to drive very far. You want something close, and everybody wants wholesale. If you're a consumer who doesn't want to use, white refined sugar poison, then this is the game. And he was pretty much the only game in town in his locality. I had a lot of inquiries from other beekeepers, so clearly there was other interest in selling 5-gallon buckets, and most of them were from out of state and had very large apiaries. I think some of them up to 200 hives. Nevertheless, over a period of over a year, Jamie was able to sell his inventory, gain many new customers, nice customer base, and is pretty much sold out as of the making of this video, with several customers waiting. Now, the problem with selling out is if you sell out before your next harvest, those customers are going to go find somebody else. if you can't supply their product. So making and keeping relationships with other beekeepers is important. When I was in my law practice, the first 3 or 4 years, I had more referrals from other law firms than I got from any other source. So having a good relationship with other beekeepers is no different than having good relationship with law firms within your locality. Take a picture of your business card and keep it in your phone. When somebody wants a card, text them a copy. They'll keep it for a lot longer. It's far more effective than passing around paper copies of a business card. As I said in the beginning, beekeepers need to add value to their product. If they're selling a commodity, they're always going to get beat out by the big dogs. Small beekeepers don't have the scale. So you need to find better ways to add value. When I would have people call in about cases, and most of them during the pandemic, I had hundreds of calls about unemployment. I would always ask if they had a work injury to try to add value to what I was doing and get another type of case that actually made money. But everybody knows about flavoring and then advertising your harvest location, which is really important. Jellies and jams, I think that's a big deal. People should be looking for local berries that they can use their honey to mix with and sweeten and sell jellies and jams. But the big one is Save the Bees, and I have a good example about that coming up. Now, when I tell people I'm a beekeeper, often people will say, you're part of the Save the Bee movement, just like saving the whales or saving wolves or whatever. I think there's something there that can be tapped into if you are that kind of a person. Now, in following the Save the Bees concept, here is a beekeeper by Blairsburg. They have a wonderful operation there and very innovative operation. But they have Adopt a Hive memberships from $50 to $250. One more way to add value. But I think you need to be able to teach very well. This guy is a high school teacher and is very good at what he does. So it works for him. I don't think it would work for me, but some people may want to look into this. And this is very local because, if you're going to adopt a hive, you want to be able to go out and see it. So it has to be local. So he probably has no competition in Blairsburg, Iowa for an adopt a hive program. And pretty much every beekeeper in the state could do it probably without competition. As the number of hives grow for beekeepers, they really should look at selling bees or queens or even queen cells. This just goes with the flow of having more bees. It is also time dependent if you have enough time. If you don't have enough time, well, then I guess you don't do it. But there sure is a lot of value in all those extra bees, and splitting hives every year is necessary to prevent swarms. I think that some local honey producers miss the point of selling in bulk. They like to sell individually to get higher prices and command full retail prices. But one of the concepts that I used when I first started my practice was to give out gifts to clients at the end of the year. And I used honey, and I would simply take honey and put a label on it, uh, and pass it out. And as long as that honey or that jar still had honey in it, the client was still seeing my name. So it was a type of advertising that was fairly inexpensive and lasted for a long period of time. This is an example of what I would do with my jars just to show the client where it came from. And as long as there was honey in the jar, they're still looking at it. I think that selling bulk to various organizations is good. They could use it for fundraisers. The high school students are always looking for something. And as long as you give them a good price point, letting high school kids go out and sell honey for you and get your product out in the community, you can sell pretty low for doing that one time just to get your product brand throughout a small community. Just showing the back of one of those bottles so it shows that the Ireland farms were the ones that produced that honey that I was showing. I wanted to give them some credit on it. They have something neat on their Facebook ad. They have an aerial photo of where their hives are located, and it really shows it's a rural area without a lot of intense agriculture, which could cause chemical contamination. If I were Honey King, I would force everyone to put some kind of cooking instructions on the back of a honey container. And because, people can cook with honey. It's fine. Right now, the honey industry acts like honey's only good for one thing, and that's to garnish baked wheat flour, crackers and breads. But 1 cup of refined white granulated sugar is about 3/4 cup raw honey. Some people say that it's a 2 to 1, that 1 cup only equates to a half cup of raw honey. I think that bears some exploration. But nevertheless, if we as an industry would tell everyone how much white sugar equivalent is in that jar of honey, maybe people would start using it for cooking. And it was widely used for cooking during World War II when sugar was rationed. I remember my grandparents telling a story about they always had cakes and pies and cookies when people came over to visit. And they showed off with it because my great grandfather kept bees in the backyard. This is a potential label for the back of any larger container. I think you could even get it on a 32 ounce if you wanted, but on those 5-gallon buckets, you could do a half sheet of paper and put this on to promote use of honey to replace granulated white refined sugar. And of all the things that the industry could do, this is it. Promote this type of labeling on containers. Consumer education also includes telling people what white refined granulated sugar really is and what the process is used to make it. Here are some of the chemicals that are often used. I'd have no idea what an ion exchange resin is. I certainly know what sulfur dioxide is and phosphoric acid. It's part of educating the consumer that honey is a good alternative as a sweetener for foods. If you're a small honey producer and want to start tapping into Google Business, you really need a web page, even if it's a free web page. I've always used a free web page. I use Wix. Now, I didn't really care if I worked full-time or part-time, and I really got my wish on the part-time because it was so hard to find clients in my early years. But they've served me well, and it's when using it with Google Business, it's been just fine. The Wix page is easy to modify, but probably if you're not computer savvy, find someone to help you and have them pick the program that they're familiar with so they can teach you. My suggestions on building your website. You really need to make the contact information and prices very easy to find. Most of these templates come up with 4, 5, and even 6 tabs at the top. If I were doing a free page selling honey, I would have pictures of all my product on the very first page, prices next to each one of them, contact information and ordering information right under that. Don't make it hard to find your prices and your product. Whatever you do, don't tell them to call for price and availability, unless you're talking about something that's unusual like 50-gallon drums. The photos are important. Obviously, I used a photo with me with a cowboy hat so people could find me back. You have to have some kind of icon, something that grabs them so that they remember that particular page or photo. I think photos of hives in the family, and I especially like the aerial photo showing where the hives were located. Sanitary processing facilities are also good images. I believe that most locally produced honey is sold on free internet sites. I know that there's, flea markets and other types of open air markets where people sell them and farmers markets and so on. But Facebook Marketplace is kind of the big one right now, and you can link your web page to it. So, and that's an advantage. Craigslist doesn't let you link it unless I think you have to have a paid ad on it. Craigslist has kind of fell out of favor, but it's still there. OfferUp is a good place. Nextdoor.com is an untapped potential because they have free ads and it's so local. You would be like the old-fashioned general store because you're looking at, I don't know, 25, 50 block area for each one of these. You would need to, post in multiple to have a good reach. Nevertheless, it's just another source. And of course, there's stuff like eBay where you actually pay to sell. And there's nothing wrong with that. But look for these resources, especially Facebook Marketplace. It just seems like that's where stuff sells. This is it. All the stuff I've told you about comes right down to this particular link. Go to this link, sign up for Google Business. It'll walk you through the process of what information you need. You need the phone number, contact information, location, business hours, web address. And once you get your profile complete, it goes up, but make sure that you pick a good photo for that profile photo, like my photo, which people remember because of the cowboy hat. Now, if I wore a cowboy hat in Western Nebraska or Colorado or Wyoming, I'd just be another lawyer. But in Iowa, it worked really well, and it's authentic because I grew up on a poor farm in northern Nebraska, just a few miles from South Dakota. I tell people if that farm had been 3 miles farther north, it'd have been the best farm in South Dakota. As it was the worst farm in Nebraska. Here's my story about TV advertising and how I got started on using Google Business. In 2020, of course, everything closed down, including the courts. And I was sitting there with nothing to do. And I got a call from an ad executive at one of the TV stations who said that his national accounts had canceled and he was about ready to crawl under his desk and curl up in a ball because it was so sickening. So he offered to sell me some TV ads. And I mean, the price was just unbelievable. I think it was $6 or $7 per ad for daytime ads. I'm not talking 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. or something like that. This is daytime ads. And he said because everybody's starting to stay home, he thought that the viewership would double. I think it tripled or quadrupled during the time I ran the ads. I bought 120 of them, read them for a month, and only had 2 phone calls. So be very careful. Don't wish for something like TV ads cheap because they don't necessarily work. Advertising is a long-term concept using television. So in 2020, as this pandemic grew and everything closed down, I started getting telephone calls, specifically on unemployment, which was one of my areas of expertise. And I asked people where they were finding me, and it turned out it was Google Business. I created an account back in 2015, never really looked at it. I had 5 reviews there I didn't know about. And so it was driving some calls to me on that issue. I would give people free advice for 5 to 20 minutes and ask them in return to give me a review. Later, I changed it to give me a 5-star review, which was far, far better. And then go in and do a follow-up, a thank you and a reply to say what other specialties I have to try to drive more traffic to my website and to my business. And that's how I got it started to getting these reviews. When I went from got up to 10, I started getting more calls. When I got to 25-star reviews, boy, I had a very noticeable increase in calls to my business, all coming from Google Business account. And also the hits going to my webpage increased significantly. But when I hit 50, oh my goodness, I couldn't believe how many calls I was getting. And it was all the result of these reviews on Google Business. Now, mine came in very quickly because the pandemic had unemployment as a major issue. A lot of people wanted help and needed help. And I had done, 15,000 cases uh, in my career. And so I had that skill set to sell. I had that unique product to sell, which honey producers need to make their product unique. Now, when you ask people for a review, everybody's going to say yes, but about 10 to 20% will follow through. The exception is when you send them a link, you'll get more people to do it. They need to have a Google Business account, not a Google Business. They need to have a Google account to be able to give a review. But that is how I was able to use Google Business without any cost to promote my practice. The same thing will work for beekeepers or any other type of business. You just need to work the system to get these customers, clients to give you reviews, and that way Google picks you up and sends more people to your site. Go to a profile, you will see their reviews, and then you click on the reviews, and this pop-up comes. And on the upper right, it'll say write a review. If you're not logged in your account, it says write a review. If you're logged in on your account, that same pop-up will say get more reviews. So again, You click on the 170 reviews. Then you get this pop-up. Then you click on Get More Reviews on this upper right corner where it says Write a Review. The next pop-up that comes shows a link, and this link will be a link that your client, your customer can use to give you a review. So it takes them right to the place they need to be. Now they need to have a Google account to do it, and most people now have one. But this is the fast, easy way to do it. You could put this link somehow in your phone and then you could text it to someone, or better, it's better to email if you have their email address, but text is okay. That way they can simply click on the link and give you a review. Encourage them to say a few words. Don't just click 5 stars. You have to have some words there. And then that gives you the opportunity to write a response to it and say, thank you for the review. And I also have jellies and jams made of honey. I also have bees to sell, and so on, and gets those keywords into the internet system. Month, Google will give you a report telling you the number of calls and hits and searches, profile views. There's very valuable information. It'll give you keywords that people use to find you and allows you to modify your Google business account and your web page to get more clients and more hits. Well, folks, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. If you have questions or comments, put them below. I respond to everyone that contacts me. I'm glad to help any Iowa beekeeper set up or, look at a system for setting up their internet sales accounts.